Today's podcast is sponsored by Tennessee Craft Beer Magazine.
It's like cracking open your favorite craft brew.
Yes, it is, DJ. Just like cracking open your favorite craft brew.
And reading the can at the same time, but you get more information.
A lot more information because they go in depth into stories and things about what's happening in Tennessee that you normally don't get to hear and normally don't get to see if you're not from that region.
From Memphis to Nashville to East Tennessee.
Yeah, it's all there.
It's like you open the magazine, it's like cracking a beer open from each part of the state.
That's right. You can find them online at tncraftbeermag.com. There you'll find digital copies of their magazine along with a statewide brewery map, events calendar, and you can even subscribe to their print edition from their website.
Print like my dad's New York Times?
Exactly like your dad's New York Times, but about beer.
Sign me up.
All right, DJ, we will do that. Tennessee Craft Beer Magazine. Again, find them online at tncraftbeermag.com.
Down in the bottom of a bottle, and I ain't gonna change my ways. But I ain't half bad when I do what I ought. It don't happen much these days.
Well, hey guys, this is Chris Hill.
This is DJ Luke.
And we're here today at Black Abbey in Nashville with Carl Meier. Carl, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Glad to have you all here.
Yeah, thank you for having us amidst the craziness of everything going on. You guys are clearly popular and busy right now.
Yeah, we had to pivot a little bit. For those of you listening at home, we had to move from where we expected to have the podcast out in the middle of the tap room today to being stuffed in the corner of the office because we got a food truck here today that was on a TV show called Shark Tank. Cousin's Maine Lobster Food Truck.
I love to take a picture of this. My wife is an adamant watcher of that show. I didn't know it was on Shark Tank. So.
And I'll tell you what, like these guys, they've just figured it out. They're real corporate. Everything is sewn up. The food's always the same. It's really good. But man, they're serving $17 lobster rolls out of a truck.
Whoa.
And people are lining up out there to get them.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow.
But who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, that's awesome, though. That's really, sounds really
First time
tasty.
they were here was in the middle of July. We timed it. They had a 70-minute wait all day until they ran out of food. They were here for 5 hours. 70-minute wait. And it was in July, and we can't have beer outside. So people went out there, they got in line, they stood there for 70 minutes to pay $17 for a lobster roll without any beer. I mean, if you went to a fancy restaurant and they told you it was a 75-minute wait and you couldn't wait at the bar, you instead had to stand in the boiler room, I wouldn't do it. But people did it for that lobster, man. It's crazy.
Wow. And they came in and bought your beer afterwards.
They came in and bought some beer. It was busy. It was fun.
Good thing is they got really hot before that, and they were really thirsty by the time they came in.
Exactly, yes. By the time they came in, they were so dehydrated they had no choice. They bought 3 or 4 beers.
My first response to that was like, well, you can drink a lot of beer in 70 minutes, but now they had to wait with no beer. Why can't you have beer outside?
Not permitted for it.
Permanent for it? Okay.
It's
another beer permit because it's state Tennessee, right?
It's yes. Grumble permits government.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Carl, again, thank you for joining us today. What I would love to do is just talk to you about the history of Black Abbey, where you all got started, how Black Abbey came to be for you, and just everything behind that.
Sure. We started just a couple of homebrewers. I grew up in upstate New York. My wife and I went to college together, lived in Stamford, Connecticut for a little while. I was working in Manhattan, and she had a job at a compensation consulting firm, but was volunteering at a hospital on the side, and decided she really liked that. And so she said, I want to find a place where I want to go into nursing. I would like to be a nurse. Okay. And so she researched a bunch of programs at universities around the country that did what they call a bridge program, where you start with a non-nursing background, and over a span of time you get your degree in Master's of Science in Nursing. So Vanderbilt was one of those places, and she decided she wanted to go there. I said, where's that? And she said, it's in Nashville, and I was about done with Manhattan. And so we moved to New York, or we moved from New York to Nashville. So I was a trailing spouse.
Okay.
she started college, getting her master's degree. I had a job, but on the weekends and whatnot, I was bored, and she had to study. So she encouraged me to join a homebrew club, which I did. Homebrew club met at a brew pub that is now gone called Bosco's. The pub was called Music City Brewers, or the club was Music City Brewers. And so while I was there, that's where I met. I started at Music City Brewers, and it's just funny how times have changed. Bosco's used to be able to smoke in there. And like I'm not super beer nerdy, but I'm nerdy enough that if I can't smell beer because of the smell of smoke, that I don't like it. And so there were several other people who were in that club that were sort of like-minded, and we thought, let's meet somewhere else. We'll meet at somebody's house. And so we started meeting at people's houses. And then we started our own club called the Antioch Sudsuckers, or ASS for short. And so that's where I met my partners, was in the Antioch Sudsuckers. And so, and then we got super competitive because we wanted to compete with the Music City Brewers in competitions. And so we started sending beer to competitions all over the country. And then in 2009, we won a silver medal in the National Homebrew Competition, which is the biggest homebrew competition in the world, with the Belgian-style Abbey Ale. And so that was in 2009, and then we decided we should start writing a business plan. So we started writing a business plan in 2009. We incorporated in 2011. 2013, we found this space, moved in March, started construction, brewed our first batch August, beer out the door in September. The backstory on the name is, you start in 2009, you start writing a business plan where you're like, well, you do what you do. You get the legal pad out and you write down your list of options and pros and cons. And we had a lot of different ideas, but none of them were sticking to the wall. And so around Halloween, I have three small, well, they're not so small anymore, but I, at the time, had three small kids. And so the kids would come out and help me mash in the driveway in the afternoon, and then I'd help put the kids to bed, and then I'd go back outside and I'd brew. And so I'd probably do that 2 or 3 times over the course of any given week. And so it was a Saturday night. It was around Halloween, and I was brewing outside. It was late at night. I was cleaning stuff up. We were struggling with the name, and I was like, oh, I got to church tomorrow. It's Sunday. It's Reformation Sunday. Am I supposed to wear red? I can't remember. It's Martin Luther. Luther was a monk. Wasn't he a monk? And so now I'm on Wikipedia researching Luther, right? And so Martin Luther, 95 Theses, excommunicated. He goes into hiding. While he's in hiding, he's under protection of this sort of feudal lord who recognizes he's harboring this political fugitive who's not in very good health. They think now he probably had Crohn's, Luther, not his protector. But so he's like, I can't let this guy croak on my watch. Like, that's going to look bad. So I don't know anything about doctoring, but I do know that if I don't feel good, my wife takes care of me, so we need to find this guy a wife. So they bust a nun out of a convent to marry Luther. Catherine von Bora was her name. And so as a wedding gift, Luther's protector gives them the monastery where Luther became a monk to begin with, wrote the 95 Theses. So the two of them move into the same monastery where he belonged as a brother. She exercises the brewery rights there, says the reason you're so sick is you drink too much wine. You're German, after all. You should be drinking beer. And they kick the monks out, start making beer in this monastery, and she essentially finances the Protestant Reformation out of a brewery where Luther starts it, right? So that monastery is called the Black Cloister. So I start, texting my business partners at, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I've got it. This is it. Black Cloister is it. And the next morning, John gets up. He reads these series of text messages, and he writes back, drink 3 beers and try to say cloister.
That's great.
And so given the fact that at the time we were very interested in Belgian-style beers, we were making a lot of Belgian-style stuff, loved Abbey ales, and so cloister and Abbey are very similar connectivity words, and so we said, well, let's swap out cloister and move in Abbey, because that gives us a lot more ground under which to work, if that makes sense.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So you get so you've got that, you've got the name, you start brewing. What was your focus with the beer that you were brewing then?
Well, at the very beginning of the company, when we won that silver medal with a Belgian Dark Strong, we always had an affinity to that sort of Belgian style stuff. But the thing that I really like about the Belgian style breweries is that they were not bound by convention, if you will. The Belgian farmhouse breweries brewed what they made because those were the ingredients that were available to them. And so the stylistic guidelines that everybody holds so dear and close weren't necessarily applicable. And so the Belgian farmhouse guys could make beers that were unique but still approachable, even if they didn't fit in a little box. And that really sort of summarized how we wanted to make beer. Did we always want to brew stuff on Belgian yeast? No. Do I want to make an IPA? Do I want to make a pale ale? Do I want to make a porter or stout? Yes, I want to make all those things. But for instance, our Pale Champion uses a little bit of smoke malt because I love the texture it gives to that beer. And is it going to win a gold medal in the GABF Pale Ale category? Probably not, because it doesn't fit that stylistic guideline of pale ale because it has that smoky phenol. So, but I love it, and it does pretty well for us, and people like it. So, we wanted to take that sort of Belgian influence, even if we're not brewing always specifically Belgian style beers, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But that was really important to us to have that influence over the way that we approach beer. Which is always, I think, two things we always think about when we start working on recipes. The beer has to be unique, but approachable, and in that compass of uniqueness, we always want the beer to have that uniqueness be a knife in the back, not a bludgeon, right? We don't want to hammer somebody over the head with something. I think a good example of that, we did a hibiscus goza this summer, and it was just perfectly balanced, right? It just had just enough hibiscus to make it pink and give it a little bit of herbal character, just enough salt so that you can perceive it, but it wasn't like saline. Just enough tart to make it crisp, not enough to make your lips pucker. It was just perfectly balanced, and our brewer, Ben Martin, came up with that recipe, and he just really captured what I felt like was the image of the brand. Unique but approachable, knife in the back, not a bludgeon.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and I've noticed that about your beer when you describe it like that, because I want to describe it to people at first as like, oh, it's a Belgian beer. They do a lot of Belgians, but then the more I get into what you all brew, it's not all Belgian. I think like number 44 that you did.
Right.
That's going to be a
One
coffee
of my
porter.
favorite lines you said it was the beer you couldn't impeach. Somebody said that?
For what?
Was it 44?
Number 44.
The beer that you couldn't impeach or couldn't get rid of, or somebody said that. I heard that somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
All right,
Because it was
let's-
the beer that you couldn't like. But
but that's-
everybody loved it so much.
I
right?
suppose
Yeah.
that's true. Yes,
Yeah.
I may have said that in a fit of drunkenness. One of the, in addition to being sort of theology wonks, we're also history nuts.
Yeah.
And we wanted. This is something else about the name, the Black Abbey, is that it gives us. We wanted something that was really reflective of who we were as people. That wasn't just it's a framework in which we want to be able to build the brand, and so we want the brand always to be reflective of us. It doesn't necessarily, have to fit into a square little box. And for instance, the hibiscus goza was called River Running, which if people are, Tolkien people, they'll be able to put that together. That's a good Hobbit reference, but that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Martin Luther, but it is reflective of us. We're very much Tolkien readers and acolytes, and I think that's important, that continues to be reflective of who we are. But the POTUS series, when we first started, we're like, we should do something that's kind of interesting. We had this idea that we would name beers after different presidents of the United States, POTUS. So the first one we did was POTUS 7, which is Andrew Jackson.
Okay.
At the time, where my kids were going to school, the development director of the Hermitage, which is Andrew Jackson's ancestral home, her kids were in class with my kids at school, and so we got to talking, and I was telling her about this thing, and she said, well, you need to come out and meet with us at the Hermitage. because it's his X number anniversary of something or other. And so we literally went out there, met with them. I sat in the conference room at the Hermitage with it's managed by the Our Ladies of the Hermitage Protection Association or something. And we sat in there, the historian and me and the development guys and these ladies, and I literally wrote the recipe for that beer on a napkin in the conference room in Andrew Jackson's house.
Wow.
It was
awesome.
so great. And they were bringing out manifests of, there was a general store that was on premise at the Hermitage when he lived there because, they had a market. It was a functioning farm.
Sure.
All of the people who lived there. And so they had a pretty good idea about what was coming and going. Jackson was a big gin drinker. And so they think they were distilling gin on premise. They don't really have proof, but they can't disprove it either. But you could tell in the manifest it was, bushels of corn and bushels of grain. And they're like, this is an awful lot for just making bread or just, they were probably distilling this. And so we made a Belgian-style farmhouse saison that used a little bit of hickory smoked malt for Old Hickory. We used some juniper berries that we literally harvested from a giant old juniper bush on the premise on the campus of the Hermitage.
Wow.
So just to try to make something that was reflective of Jackson, of his sort of heritage. And so that was the first POTUS beer we did. The second POTUS beer we did was 44, POTUS 44. And the piece behind that was we worked with a coffee shop here in town called Frothy Monkey, and they did a custom coffee blend for us that used Kenyan and Hawaiian coffee. And so we said that beer was liberally infused with Kenyan and Hawaiian coffee. It had a dazzling personality and a little bit of smoke that won't quit. And so that was just going to be number 2. So we did POTUS 7, then we did 44, then we did POTUS 3, which was for Jefferson. And so Jefferson actually had a brewer, lived at Monticello. They were making beer at Monticello during and after his presidency. But it was mostly based of corn. So we brewed a corn saison that was sort of loosely based on an actual recipe that was brewed at Monticello. And so we dropped 44, we started brewing POTUS 3, and then there was just sort of outcry that we had dropped the coffee porter. Yeah. And so we brought it back, and the POTUS beers were always designed to be one and done. We were just, unless it was a 2-term president, maybe we were going to do them twice, but except, then the FDR beer, right? But so they were always sort of designed to be a rotating series. Mm-hmm. Well, now all of a sudden we've got this rotating series that we're brewing year round, and in conjunction with other POTUS beers going into market at the same time. And so this got very confusing for our retail partners as well as our distributor partners, because we might be we're sending them in. They're on different price points. The guys who are picking the orders in the warehouse see the keg collar that says POTUS, and they don't necessarily look to see POTUS 44 or POTUS 3 or POTUS 7 or POTUS 34, whatever it's going to be. And so that got to be very complicated. And so at that point, we were also getting ready to start canning. We decided that we would graduate POTUS 44 out of the POTUS series, make it an official year-round beer, drop the POTUS off the name and just call it 44, and then we could just put it in cans. Because the last thing we wanted to do was mess up the grocery chains. Yeah. If our distributor partners are trying to send something to the grocery chains, those grocery guys, it's got to be right. And just because we've come up with this, quirky but confusing naming convention on one of our more popular beers was not a good reason for them to not drop us if it got messed up. So we decided to graduate it up out of the POTUS series because it was now a year-round and packaged brand.
Wow.
Is that one of your top sellers, or?
Yes. So
it's a great beer.
The Rose is our number 1 seller.
That's what I was thinking.
Number 2 is tied. It almost always is 5 Points, which is our IPA, which is named after not the geography in East Nashville, but the 5 Points of Calvinism. Yeah. Which apparently there's a new mnemonic to remember the 5 Points of Calvinism. It's bacon. Yeah. But I'm sticking with the tulip.
Yeah, the tulip's fine.
But then, so 44 and 5 Points are always tied for number 2.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. Do you know if 44 has had 44?
He was in town. He came into town multiple times during his presidency, but one time he actually went to a little Mexican restaurant just up the street here. This is terrible, but so I mean they were so excited,
Yeah.
and so they took a ton of pictures, and so the whole place is full. Yes, I mean it's the whole restaurant is just full of pictures of the staff all hugging Barack Obama, and he's just so we started calling it Taco Obama. Because it's just, I mean, the whole place, you walk in and you're just like, what, does he own this place? But literally, he came and went to a taco shop around the corner from us, but no, he hasn't. We keep waiting for the black choppers, you know. Like, the black SUVs pull up out front, the guys come in with the headphones and are just like, we're here for let Mr. President sample some of this beer. We're waiting one day.
Yeah.
One day.
Could happen.
It could happen one day. but
Any
that's-
more presidents on that coming down the line? Or?
You know, we haven't done a POTUS beer in quite a while. This past election cycle was very
volatile.
Little volatile. and honestly, we get a lot of questions about 45. And regardless of your feelings about our current president, his brother died an alcoholic. Basically died of cirrhosis of the liver. And that to name a beer after a guy who doesn't drink because his brother died of alcoholism just makes my stomach feel creepy.
Yeah.
And so we've stepped away from the. I thought that was a full beer that just dropped into my laundry. We've stepped away from that for the time being, but it's going to come back around. We actually the rotating series of stuff right now is called the Stained Glass series. Nice. We have a 20 barrel brew house, and so we brew in 40 keg increments. But we have one 20 barrel fermenter that we use specifically for the one-off, unique, limited release project beers, and so they fall under the Stained Glass series. The ones that are over 7% are considered Stained Glass Omega, or Alpha rather, and then the lower than 7% are considered Stained Glass Omega.
Okay.
And so right now that's sort of taken the place in a certain respect of the POTUS series, and honestly, it fits our brand a little bit better.
I think so.
Than
I can see that.
than the presidential stuff, but we'll come back around. We've done a number. The one that I really am excited to do is POTUS 8 or 9. It's now been so long I forget. William Henry Harrison. He gave the longest inaugural address in the history of the presidency. He spoke for 120 minutes in January in the rain, and then he died 31 days later. Yes, he wouldn't wear a coat. He caught the flu.
Yeah.
It was 9, right? It's POTUS 9. So we're going to do he was Scottish, or had some Scotch history, and so we're going to do a Scottish ale called POTUS 9 to 120-minute boil and do a limited 31-day release.
That's awesome.
But if the next one we do, that's going to be it, but I got to let it simmer down a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Well, true.
That's funny. That's really cool. I'm pointing at DJ.
Why are you pointing at me for?
Because I thought you had something to
No,
ask.
I
very
thought
important.
I know you looked like you were about to say something. We're professionals here.
Yeah, we're professionals, and we never run into things like this at all.
Oh.
I mean, I've got a lot to say. You can just,
Keep talking, man.
I mean, I feel like after that last, I needed to take a breath for a minute.
Yeah, I notice in addition to theology being a big part and history being a big part of what you guys do, it looks like Iron Maiden and maybe music is a big part of your brand as well, or at least a personal expression within the brewery that I've seen a lot.
That was either going Iron Maiden or Billy D. Williams. I wasn't sure what direction you were going with that.
Well, I only saw the Iron Maiden poster when I brought it up, but I see Megadeth, Bryan Adams.
Yeah, I do have a like Empire Strikes Back era Billy D. Williams Colt 45 sign hanging here in the office.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
He's wearing a white tux. For those of you watching at home, he's wearing a white tux and a red bow tie, and he's opening a giant can of Colt 45 with a very attractive lady on his arm who looks very much like Claire Huxtable.
It does.
It does. Am I right? And she looks just like her.
It might be her.
It might actually be her. But he looks like a happy man. I'll give him that. He's wearing a white tux with cufflinks. Works every time.
That is a dapper Lando right there.
I have a Colt 45 tin that was given to me that my wife has not let me put up in our downstairs pub. It's Snoop Dogg holding a Colt 45 advertisement, but it was been banished from the Goldfinch pub.
No.
So,
I feel like it should get a second look.
I think so too. I mean, I love it, but my wife didn't care for it. It will get up there when she's not paying attention.
Well, and you can just tell her, I was at this brewery in Nashville, and they got this light up sign hanging in the office. But yeah, we're also moderate hair metal guys. So John is our head brewer, my business partner, and then our third partner, Mike, is a physician. So he's not active in the business day to day, but the three of us meet every Monday. But so John and I are here every day, and for a long time, either John or I would do tours on Saturday. And so one of our regulars came in, and knowing our propensity for 80s era hair metal, she brought us that rat poster that's hanging over there. And so when she brought it in, I tacked it up on the wall. And on Monday, John typically gets here before I do. And so he was sitting in the office when I walked in, and he's like, all right, we need to talk. I said, oh no, what have I done? And he said, this is not your dorm room. This is our office. And I was like, what are you talking about? Did I leave like my underwear around or what happened? And he's like, no, this rat poster. What's up with the rat poster? They look like girls. And I was like, dude, one of our regulars brought that in. I had to hang it up. And he's like, all right. And it stayed. I mean, it's been there for years.
That's right.
But yeah, all of these Iron Maiden posters did come from my dorm room, actually.
Awesome.
They're totally my dorm room posters.
But still, really cool. That's fun that you can bring that side of your personality into the brewery, into the business that you're running.
We really try to incorporate some of that stuff. Our triple that we did last spring is called Grand Design, which was kind of a head nod to Rush. Our Oktoberfest is called Chronicles, also a little bit of a head nod to Rush. So we do try to incorporate some of that stuff into our branding.
A lot of your stuff is like very kind of, you have a concept. Do you do a lot of that stuff? Like you'll have the concept, like you'll have a name and you'll have like a concept for the beer, then you do the recipe? Or do you just have a recipe, then that recipe brings a name?
It depends. That's a really good question, actually. For instance, Guy Fawkes, our brown ale comes out every year on November 5th because that's Guy Fawkes Day. And when we first moved to Nashville, I worked for United Way, but then I left United Way and I went to work for AmSouth Bank. And so, as you know, bankers get a bad rap because they get days off that other people maybe don't, right? They get the federal holidays off.
Jerry Shelton, if you're listening.
Bankers hours, whatever. And so we were closed every time we were closed on a holiday when, honestly, when daycare was open, I would send the kids to school and I would stay home and brew. And so my assistant and I one day were sitting around in the office and we're like, all right, well, what are some other ridiculous holidays that are coming up that we could decide the bank needs to be closed for? And the first one was Guy Fawkes Day. And so we're like, we're gonna take it off. So we took Guy Fawkes Day off work because we decided the bank needed to be closed. They weren't, but we were off. And we took the kids to school and we're like, we're gonna brew an English style brown ale with a little bit of smoke malt. So that we called it a gunpowder brown, and so we're gonna brew this. We're gonna brew this beer on Guy Fawkes Day, and that was sort of the beginning of that. But so that one we had a name, but we didn't have a beer. Some of them it's the other way around, where you have a beer and you're like, well, all right, what are we gonna name this? We got to come up with a name. But a lot of times, at least with the core stuff, that happened simultaneously. Our flagship beer, the Rose, our Belgian Blonde, when we were kind of lining up what the opening beers were going to be and putting those recipes together and deciding what we were getting good competition results on and good feedback on tasting notes, we were very much involved in kind of Luther lore and history, and so we were talking a lot about Luther's crest, which his crest is a gold ring on a blue background with a white rose and a red heart in the middle with a black cross on top of it. And so we had decided that we were going to use those components to name beers: gold ring, blue field, white rose, red heart, black cross. Until we realized we were a purple horseshoe away from Lucky Charms. And that was stupid. And so we scrapped that with the exception of the white rose, or the rose, which stayed. And so of the beers that we had on the table at the time, the one we felt like best fit the rose was this Belgian-style blonde that we were working on. And so that was attached to the moniker Rose, or White Rose. So it's interesting how that's kind of developed over time. 44 was very much... it was a friend of mine's idea, actually, where he's like, you should do an Obama beer. And I was like, dude, you're crazy. Like, we do religion, we don't do politics. And he's like, no, it should be liberally infused with Kenyan and Meier. It was his joke. I was like, that's funny.
Yeah.
And so we were working on a porter recipe for the brewery at the time. And I was like, all right, well, we'll cold brew some coffee. Actually, I can't remember how we did the original one, if I hot brewed it or what. But I was serving on the board of a nonprofit here in town, and we had a board retreat, which was my first introduction to cold brew coffee. I'd never had cold brew coffee before. Ooh. And it just absolutely melted my brain.
It's amazing.
It was so great, and of course, I mean, I was basically drinking it straight, so I was, but it really, I was like, this is the most amazing coffee I've ever had.
Yeah.
And so when we got in contact with Frothy, we get to talking about it, and it's like, well, I mean, of course, the cold brew process reduces the acid content of the coffee, and the one thing you don't want to do when you're making beer is make your pH too low, because it starts getting funky and tart and weird, and so you don't want to pump a bunch of real acidic coffee into beer. It changes your pH. So we've been, in addition to brewing the coffee cold, we use another Tennessee-based product called Real Water, which is water that is pH adjusted up. So it's an average pH somewhere between 8 and 10, so that it further balances the acid content of that coffee. So we want the coffee that's going into the beer to be as close to the beer pH as possible. And so we're able to do that by manipulating the pH through pH-adjusted water, as well as the cold brew process.
Wow, that's really cool. If you ever want the hot version of a cold brew, try Chemex. I don't know if you've ever had that or not. I had some last night, and I think it's the reason I was up late. But
is that sounds like acid or something.
I'll share something with you later. It's Chemex.
Okay.
It was developed by a German. Surprise, surprise.
Those guys are smart.
And it's a filtration process that takes out the acidity in coffee, but it does it in a hot process and takes 10 minutes as opposed to 12 hours. So something to consider. But anyways, something going back to before I was drawing a blank and deferred to DJ. You mentioned the stained glass series and the Alpha and the Omega. What beyond that are you doing with that series? What is the actual focus beyond Alpha being the high grav version and Omega being kind of the lower grav?
The real kind of idea behind the stained glass series was twofold. One, it was an opportunity for us to continue to grow our small batch program that feeds the tap room into something that reaches more into the broad market. Right now, I mean, as you can imagine, a brewery becomes a manufacturing plant. And so, when you start as a home brewer, it's all about creativity, and it's never the same way twice. And then you get into the manufacturing side of it, and it becomes about marketability, and it's always the same way. And so you say, okay, well, we're making Rose, and we're making Champion, and we're making 5 Points, and these beers have got to be the same way every single time, which is great, and our guys do a really good job at that. But at the same time, we have a little small batch pilot system that we use to feed the tap room, so that our fellowship hall, we call it, and so that fellowship hall has always got stuff that's in there that is only available here. But it's only coming in one or two. We're running basically a glorified homebrew system, so it's coming in 1 or 2 keg increments, which is great, but it's difficult to maintain consistency. And then what happens if we like those beers and we start getting pretty consistent results? Well, if we're going to jump from 10 gallons, 15 gallons to 40, 80 half-barrel kegs, that's a big jump. And so we wanted the opportunity to have that sort of taproom exclusive feel on a beer that was going out into the broad market. And so that was the beginnings of the idea of the Stained Glass series, was a way to grow our small batch program into something that we could also send a little bit of out into the market. So we've got a lot of it stays in the taproom to support our kind of taproom guests, and then we'll place some of it out in the market.
Yeah, I'll always see something on Facebook, and I'll see like a beer releasing, and then it's just taproom only, or just gonna be a limited release here. Maybe you might bring it back or something. But I'll always
excited when I see that stuff, and then I go,
yeah. And then I always like
drive to Nashville.
Exactly. I always text Christine. I was like, "Can you give me some of that? Is there any way?"
Well, and that's something that's really great about our presence in the Knoxville market, is that they're always willing to partner with us on at least bringing a couple of things up there. It may not be 2 pallets of beer. It may just be a couple of kegs. Mm-hmm. But Christina does a really good job of getting into setting up events surrounding that and bringing in that specialty stuff, because there's an appetite for the unique, and we have the opportunity to provide it, and so we try to.
You get to do a really great beer with Alliance Brewing Company.
Those guys are so great.
Yeah. They're only 2 minutes and 19 seconds away from my house, but who's counting?
Yeah. Yeah, they're
car.
Yeah, they've been really fun to work with. When we first, so Christina is our East Tennessee rep, and she's been up there just over a year. But when we first went up there, Chris was there too, but it was mostly Adam, took us around, and we got into a lot of mischief.
With Adam Engel?
No, would never.
No.
But we had a lot of fun.
A lot of mischief with Adam too.
The Knoxville beer community has been so open and welcoming. We've just had such great positive experiences with.
That's great to
hear. In addition to Alliance, the guys at Crafty has been so great, and Hexagon's been wonderful. And it's been really nice to have the opportunity to interact with a brew scene that's close to your hometown, but it's not. Mm-hmm. But you invest in that market, and you have a staff person that lives there and is very participatory in the Knoxville chapter of the Pink Boots, and it's just we did a beer with the Pink Boots, Knoxville Pink Boots, which was a lot of fun. They came down here and brewed.
My wife is the treasurer.
Oh, of course.
Group, so.
But man,
we had a brag or anything.
No, not the brag. I'm just saying I know the relation.
Well, man, they came down here, so we're going to brew on a Sunday morning, right? Because that's Sunday after. No, it was morning. It was definitely morning. And so we're like, "Oh, what'd you do last night?" And they said, "Well, we went to Fran's." I'm like, "You went to Fran's? Like, Fran's is a place where there's sawdust on the floor? Man, there's only one reason you put sawdust on the floor of a bar, and that's to sop up blood or pee. Either way, you don't want to be in there." And I'm like, "You went to Fran's? Why?" They're like, "We're going to sing karaoke." Like, how many karaoke bars are in this town? And you went to the scary one. But anyway, they had a good time and they lived. So that's, that was positive.
Yeah. Very cool.
What?
Deferring to DJ again.
Are you just losing track here?
Dude, I'm just losing track right now. But you've been on top of it.
Have I been on top of it?
Yeah. We talked theology before we really started diving into the podcast. I know you're a bit of a theology nerd. Where does that passion come from for you?
It's I don't know. It comes from a lot of places. I grew up Associate Reformed Presbyterian, which is about as frozen as the chosen.
Yeah, the frozen chosen. Yeah.
But my dad is a ruling elder of the church and has been chair of the presbytery for a number of years, and that's just always been a part of my life growing up. John I met in the homebrew club. Mike, I introduced him to the homebrew club because he and I served on the diaconate at church together. And so that has always been an extremely important and kind of focal point of my life personally. And so, to have a brand that's reflective of who you are as people, I believe really makes it more authentic. We didn't ever want to just say, all right, we're going to be the Colors Brewery, and so we're going to just name all our beers after different colors. And there's, sort of an infinite possibility. We just name them after crayons, whatever. But and you could do it, right? You've got a pretty much endless supply of Crayola names.
Yeah.
But it just, we wanted it to be something where we could have fun with it and have it be like, oh, those guys, like that's reflective of who they are. And so a big part of who we are is an appreciation for music. It's an appreciation for history. And it's an appreciation for theology and our kind of base belief systems. And again, with the knife in the back, not a bludgeon, like this is, it's never been something where we try to proselytize people or try to, this isn't necessarily some sort of conversion tactic. But we want to be able to walk our walk.
As who you are.
Yes, and we're not shy about it, and we're not embarrassed about it, but we're also not trying to beat you in the face with it.
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorite things that we do is we partner with an organization based here in Nashville called Beer and Hymns.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that.
And they came to us. It was a couple of guys based out of downtown Prez that were meeting in a local bar, and they were getting together and singing hymns. And very quickly got too big for the bar where they were. And we had just opened, and so they approached us. I don't know how they found out about us, but they sent a Facebook message in and asked if we would host it.
I mean, it would be kind of cool to sing Mighty Fortress while drinking a Mighty Fortress.
Listen, man, I don't give away my punchline in the story. But so we, so I said, you guys can come in. We'll host it here. He did. Yeah, that's his most famous hymn.
Sorry, I'm singing in my head.
But so we said, yes, you can come in. So it's a ticketed event, and about a week before the actual event, it sold out. So I had to hire a bouncer to make sure that people didn't come in to the hymn sing at the brewery. Right? So it was wildly successful, and they said, hey, we want to move this to Mercy Lounge, which is a venue, which is a rock venue here in town. And I said, dude, you are crazy. It's too big. It's the max capacity at Mercy, I think, is 400 people, something like that. I was like, man, it's a big jump from 75 people to 400 people. And he said, well, we're going to do it. Okay. And so St. Patrick's Day will be our 12th time doing Beer and Hymns at Mercy. We've sold out Mercy Lounge 5 times, 6 times. It's crazy. And the thing about it, the very first one we did, I remember, it was probably 250 people. So we went from the brewery where it was maybe slightly more than 75 people in here to Mercy where it was 250 people. And I'm like standing out in the crowd and they're singing and I hear like people talking. And one lady says to another lady, I don't go to church anymore because I don't want to be preached at. But I love these old songs. And I thought to myself, if you're singing these old songs, you don't need to be preached at. You are preaching it yourself. If you were you want to talk about, I get chills just thinking about it. Like, you start talking about some of those, and none of it's 100-year-old hymns. Yeah. We're talking about It Is Well With My Soul, and like the just rich theology that is embedded in those words. You just can't do any better than that. And for us, again, it's something that it's not something where we're like standing out on the street, handing out friggin' pamphlets, trying to get people to go. But people will come and they'll drink some beers, and it loosens your inhibitions just enough that you're willing to get yourself involved. And it's changed the way that my family worships. Like, we switched churches because I would go on a Saturday night, drink my face off and sing hymns. And then Sunday morning we'd be in a like a big church congregation communion setting where it's an organ-driven worship service, it just fell flat for me. It just didn't feel participatory enough. And, you know, and I've never been I mean, like I say, we're Frozen Chosen. We don't do charismatic, what I used to jokingly refer to as the REO Speedwagon worship service is like not what we do. Like that's never been a part of our culture, our family culture. But the engagement and the energy and the power of that group sing is absolutely unhinging. And to be a part of that, that's obviously I'm excited about the beer and hymn stuff. We're doing one on St. Patrick's Day at Mercy is our next. Awesome. You want to talk about a town that's about to come unglued? St. Patrick's Day in Nashville, SEC basketball or SEC, the NCAA basketball tournament is in town.
Oh my gosh.
On the 16th, Friday the 16th, basketball games all day. Saturday the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Sunday the 18th, more basketball. Whew. This town's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. And then in the middle of it, beer and hymns.
Now, have you got any pushback from any churches or any places or anything for the association? Because
No.
I mean, Southern culture.
No, it's been interesting in that because it's not something that we push through that channel.
Yeah.
Like we promote beer and hymns through beer. I don't necessarily promote beer and hymns through the church side. We did one down in Franklin. We did one at a pub down in Franklin called Buggin' Up Pig. And when we were down there for the first, we did maybe 2 or 3 at Buggin' Up. But the first time we did that at Buggin' Up, I remember I was standing behind this lady and she leaned back to talk to her husband. We were singing, it was right around Easter, and we were singing Up From the Grave He Arose, right? And so everybody was standing up with their beers in the air, and we're stamping our feet on the floor, and up from the grave he arose, right? It's just like, invigorating pub singing.
Yeah.
And this lady leans back and she says, I'm not sure we should be doing this. And I heard her, and so I leaned down close where both her and her husband could hear me, and I said, what else would make you do this? Right? Like, what other message than up from the grave he arose, a resounding triumph for his foes, he arose a victor from the dark domain, right? Like, what else would make you get up out of your chair and stomp your feet on the floor and spill beer on the person in front of you because you're pumping your fist with your pint in the air, right? What else could make you do that? And she didn't have a good answer, so she got up out of her chair and sang that song like her life depended on it.
That's awesome.
Right? You want to talk about a powerful, like, I don't know, is that some conversion moment? I don't know. It was what it was for me.
But it was powerful for her.
I hope so.
It impacted her.
And it was just great. Like, that for me is literally the summary of what Beer and Hymns is about. So do we ever get a little blowback on it? I mean, I think some people make fun of it because it obviously has a religious connection. But I think also this is sort of the beauty of the Nashville beer scene is that everybody's got their own little personality. So everybody sort of does their own little thing. And, part of our thing is beer and hymns. Another part of our thing is Iron Maiden. And it doesn't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. Yeah. Like, that is all tied up within us as people.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. We Anthrax is coming to play Nashville on February 5th. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing a pre-party over at Marathon Music Works where we've brewed some Anthrax-themed beers. I've been telling everybody, I was like, I can't wait to start telling people that we're brewing beers with Anthrax. Some people are going to be like, dope, that's awesome. And other people are going to be like, they're with ISIS. They're trying to kill us. But anyway, we've brewed some Anthrax-themed beers that we'll be pouring at Marathon on the 5th before the Anthrax show. With Killswitch Engage and Havoc.
Wow.
Which is going to be fun, but that's just, whatever. It's just sort of part of who we are, and we're not embarrassed about it. It just you can coexist, if humans are complex, and as a Calvinist, I believe that people broken, and that part of that brokenness is how we were made. And you repent and you ask for forgiveness, but you're beautiful in the way that you are. And we try to respect that, and by letting our brand reflect who we are.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the beauties of, the craft beer scene in general, right? Like, just that self-expression comes out so much in so many different breweries that we talk to, so many different places that we talk to. Nashville, definitely. We see it in Knoxville too, with everybody from Crafty Bastard to Alliance, as we talked about earlier. And just that diversity that's there. That's what we love about it. Just like we like Iron Maiden or the Shins or whatever indie band you love, it's just that self-expression and that heart of who they are. You're drawn to something about that brand, that business that you really enjoy. So
it's stories and personality, and I think a lot of that is, that's what people are drawn to. We're not making Crest toothpaste, right? Like, people buy Crest toothpaste because that's what their dad buy. I don't know, why ever you buy Crest toothpaste is what I buy, but people make their decisions on what beer they're going to buy, not just on what the beer tastes like, but also on the story that surrounds it. And
when Black Abbey came into the East Tennessee market, I think I may have had the Rose and the Champion, and never really thought anything about it. And I never thought anything about the names. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, it was just really great beer. Black Abbey, Belgian connection or something. I didn't really know the story. Then I saw the 5 Points IPA. I'm like, something was like, oh, I saw that 5 Points IPA and the tulip on the can. I'm like, oh, there's a religious connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started reading about it, and then I was drawn to the brewery even more because I'm a Calvinist myself, and so I was like, because I love Reformation Brewing Company. There's a couple other kind of Reformation themed breweries in the around the southeast or around the country, and so it was like, that made me even like, I not only did I had a beer connection, I had another personal connection. Mm-hmm. So which made my kind of enjoyment of the beer even more.
And it's funny. I teased this before, but I didn't finish the story. The other cool thing about Beer and Hymns is that they do try to incorporate some elements of popular culture into the way that they present that stuff. And so the way that we've been doing this lately is they'll come back, like, it's usually broken up into 2 or 3 sets, and so they usually come back from a set break, and they'll start by singing Bohemian Rhapsody, and they roll that into Mighty Fortress, which is hilarious. It's hilarious.
I really want to hear that turn.
Yeah,
it's the greatest. The best one, and the best one in my opinion, because I thought of it. I don't know whether it was really a good one, but it felt like it was to me. It was that one that we did right around Easter. We may do it at the St. Patrick's one. We sang the what's it called? Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Were you there? Were you there when we crucified my Lord? Right. Oh. And so, like, really, like, moving, sad, powerful song. And so after the "Were you there when they laid him in the tomb" verse, I suggested, against their better judgment, they did it. They went into the minor key "Remember the Titans" version of "Na na 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 hey 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 goodbye." And so they started singing it, and some of the people in the place didn't sing, and other people laughed sort of uncomfortably, and then some people sang it, and then in that, like, minor key, just like at the end of that movie, and then they went right into "Were you there when he rose up?" From, and it got loud, and it got, like, electric, and, like, I saw some lady start crying. It was great, and they're like, "All right, yeah, okay, maybe that worked."
That's great.
Yeah, but that's, to incorporate that sort of mixed bag of, we're not just gonna sing these hymns. We're gonna incorporate a little bit of, pop into this too. It brings people along.
Well, and that's really cool too to hear you say that, because I know a lot of the old hymns, especially the ones from the early 1900s, were adapted to popular show songs and bar songs of the time. So to do that, I mean, truly is in the tradition of what Christians were actually doing in the early 1900s to reach folks in bars.
It's funny, we were talking about this as it related specifically to Mighty Fortress, because the thing about Fortress is everybody thought, I've read a lot about it, and it's really questionable whether or not it's true, but that the idea was that Luther adapted the lyrics for Mighty Fortress were to a German drinking song. I think that's probably not true. But man, it's a great story.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
especially after a few pints, it's a great story.
So I mean, Luther was a beer drinker.
Yeah.
He was an he was
those who consume more beer sleep more. Those who sleep more sin less.
Yes. I mean, and that's
the Luther quote.
Yes, and he was he enjoyed beer. I mean, he would joke with his pals. He had a giant stein that had 3 rings, and the top ring represented the 10 Commandments. The middle ring represented the Lord's Prayer, and the bottom ring represented the Apostles' Creed. And so he would joke that he could drink through all 3 rings in one swallow, but that none of his pals could get past the first ring, and so they would try, and they couldn't, and he would say, "See, you are still under the law." Which I love the great Reformed humor.
That's it.
That's awesome.
Oh man. Awesome. So tell us here about we've kind of touched on it some, but the fellowship hall where you guys are at. Like, I mean, you said you did the beer and hymns, but what other events you have going on, and what kind of stuff you guys do here?
Our tap room is in the manufacturing plant. We call it Fellowship Hall. It's designed to sort of be a cross between a German beer hall and a monastery chapter house. And so we do have, some old church pendulum lights that hang in there. It's big archways, but it's not, there's no other sort of overt religious themology, if that's a word. But we're open 7 days a week, so our tap room's open all the time. People come in, drink beer. We have food trucks with some regularity. But we like to do events in here at least once a month, and in February we've got 2 that are big. We've always aged beer in barrels. We always liked barrel aging, even when we were homebrewers. The first Best in Show medal that we ever won as homebrewers was with a Jack Daniel's barrel-aged beer. Although I probably shouldn't have said that, because that was back when you could go down to Lynchburg and buy a Jack Daniel's barrel at the general store. Nowadays, man, if you say something was Jack Daniel's barrel-aged, boy, you better have their sign-off on it, because they're very litigious. But this was a long time ago. The statute.
If we need to edit it out, just let me know.
No, I'm sure the statute of limitations on this was long gone.
You're a lawyer. You can answer that for us.
But we never sold it. We were just homebrewers. Anyway, so
homebrew is okay. Yeah.
So we've always loved aging beer in barrels, and so when we started the brewery, we almost immediately started putting beer into barrels. When we were getting ready to get started, it was 44 actually. I had some at home, and we were brewing it, and so I drove down to the tap room at Corsair, which is a local distillery here in town. And so I came in and I said, "Look, I'm a home brewer. We're getting ready to start a brewery. Whatever." I get to talk to Emily, who's the tap room manager down there, and she's like, "Look, I hear this all the time. Yes, you can have a barrel, you can have one, but this is on one condition, is that whatever comes out of that barrel, you got to bring it back here and let me try it." So that's fair. And so she gave me a 15-gallon barrel, and I brought it home, and we aged some beer in it. And literally, then we started the brewery. And so now I'm going back down there, because at the time they were bringing in a lot of guest taps in their little beer tap room. And so I'm down there selling them beer. And so I come back in with a growler of that Corsair barrel-aged beer. And I said, "Do you remember when you gave me that barrel and I brought the beer back?" And she's like, "No shit. Somebody finally brought it back." So she brings the guys out of the back, and she's like, "You brought some of this." So we sit around, we're drinking this barrel-aged beer, and they loved it. And so they're like, "This is so great. We're so glad you guys are getting open. Yes, we'll pick your beer up. And if you want to do some other barrel-aging stuff, just let us know." And so, I took a couple barrels here, a couple barrels there, and then, next thing we know, we got a bunch of barrel-aged beer in kegs in the cooler. And so Ben, who is one of our brewers, was like, "Hey man, this stuff's piling up. We should probably do something with it." Like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Maybe we'll just run it through the tap room. And he's like, no, maybe we should have an event. We should do like an event, in February when it's kind of slow and people are breaking their New Year's resolutions. Maybe we do like a Groundhog Day event or something. And so we get talking about it, and we're like, well, there's 6 more weeks of winter, and let's just do 8 more beers of winter, because we had 8 taps at the time. And so
Groundhog Day, another day to take off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so we're like, all right, we're going to do this event. And so we publicized it as 8 more beers of winter, and we're going to do all this barrel-aged beer. And we opened the door, and we got annihilated. Overwhelmed. We weren't staffed appropriately. Literally, my pastor was here bussing glasses. It was completely out of control. And after it was over, we were like, okay, that was a lot of fun. We need to do that again. So let's maybe think about it and plan it ahead of time. And so this year is the 5th year that we'll be doing 8 more beers of winter, the first Saturday of February. So February 3rd, from 12 to 8, we're going to have 12 taps of barrel-aged beer all day, changes all day, mostly Corsair. We're going to be tapping the elusive Lorica, which is our Jameson barrel-aged Belgian double. We've got a couple other projects. There's an Eagle Rare barrel in there. There's a Blanton's barrel, a couple other things. But so that's February 3rd. And then at the end of February, much the same story. We did this last year. My daughter was a Girl Scout, and so she needed to sell some cookies. So we were like, oh, well, whatever. We'll sell them at the brewery. Maybe we'll do like a cookie pairing or something. And so we decided we'd do a Girl Scout cookie and beer pairing. So my youngest is 8, and so she missed or doesn't remember a lot of the brewing at home because she was too little. And so I was sort of, she doesn't like that the other ones remember that, but she doesn't. And so we said, oh, we will just, we'll come in and you and I will brew a beer that we can pair with these cookies. And so I took a picture of her helping me mash in. She was in her uniform, and I used it on the Facebook event.
How'd that go?
Yeah,
over?
they didn't love that. No, they sure didn't. They sure hated that. And so we got a little sideways with that organization for a little while. But we did the event anyway, and it was wildly successful. And so we decided we were going to do it again this year, and so I've been a little more diplomatic about how we advertise it without using any sort of copyrighted, branded, federally protected materials. But it's funny. We're pairing the cookies. We structure it just the same way we do our normal flights. We just do a flight of 4 beers and a flight of 4 cookies. They come together. It's $10, so it's not cheap. We're giving the cookies away and selling the beer. But it's a lot of fun, and it's an opportunity for folks that otherwise may not be totally into going to a brewery or being craft centric. Girl Scout cookies are like crack cocaine. When that stuff comes out, people lose their minds. Yeah. And so it's a lot of fun. Well, I'm sure we'll probably have a food truck that comes. Samoa, right?
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. February 24th. So it's the last Saturday of February. February 24th is the Girl Scout cookie and beer pairing.
So you're moving up in our podcast release schedule just by telling me all this. I just want you to know. We want to make sure people know this stuff is going on. That's awesome. That's really awesome. That's really exciting. I hear there's a bus coming from Knoxville as well. I think for the February. You said 8th. Is that right? The
8 More Beers of Winter is on February 3rd.
February 3rd. Yeah,
yes,
I think so.
Yeah. Zach's outfit is running a bus down here. It's a day trip. They're coming down. They're going to the Gulch, hitting a couple of beer bars down there. They're coming here right at noon. Then they're going to dinner and rolling back.
Yeah. That's it's Knox Brew Tours Zach, but it's what's the name of his new Epic?
Epic.
Thank
that's
you.
It.
Epic with a K. Yeah. It's his new line of travel. Yeah. So
now, are you going to be doing some big events for the Craft Brewers Conference?
Craft Brewers Conference, which is the biggest event that our industry has, a big trade show and convention, happens in Nashville for the first time the last day of April and first week of May. So April 29th through May 3rd or 4th, something like that. we're going to have extended taproom hours and food trucks and all that stuff. We also have got a couple of collaboration projects with a couple of breweries lined up. I haven't signed all the papers yet, so I can't really announce what they are. But we've got a couple collabs that are lined up that will do events, launching those when those happen.
Nice.
I told my wife just 2 nights ago, it's like, first off, don't expect to see me during that week. And second off, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm even going to the conference. Like, I may just stay here.
Yeah.
Because I expect the tap room is going to be pretty busy. But it's a good opportunity for us to showcase our brand in front of a national audience.
Huge.
Because distributors and other breweries and suppliers and vendors are coming from all over the country to Nashville. And I think that a lot of our breweries are similar setups to ours, where we've got a pretty decent sized manufacturing plant, but we've got relatively small tap rooms. It's going to get crazy real fast. So I'm not sure how that's all going to work out, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be crowded and it's going to be crazy. But yeah, as far as the specific events go, I don't have a firm date on it, but one of those nights we're going to be at Martin's Barbecue downtown. A couple of guys that work there are in a local metal band called Denman, and they're like 80s era Metallica thrash. They're great, and they've been wanting to play on the stage in the upstairs beer garden at Martin's for a long time, and I think we finally got Pat on board. Because Pat Martin, I don't know if y'all have gone to Martin's Barbecue. If you have not, you should go check it out. If for no other reason than Pat Martin, like me, has got a real soft spot in his heart for the 80s hair metal. And so their brand is very much like traditional barbecue. So you go in there and you're going to get, on the juke, it's going to be, Waylon Jennings and Jerry Reed, and it's like old school country. Then just like they'll sneak in a little Black Sabbath. Or a little Judas Priest. It'll just come in and you'll be like, and it seems to happen whenever I walk in. I'm just sitting there and I'm, tonight the bottle let me down, slides right into Iron Maiden's Alexander the Great. I'm like, Alexander the Great? Like, this is a 12-minute opus. Funny.
That's great.
That's awesome. Well, last question for you. Unless you've got anything else pending on your mind. Last question for you, Carl. What's in your beer fridge at home right now?
That's a good question. The beer fridge at home is an interesting concept because unlike most civilized human beings, I do my drinking at work. So my beer fridge, my beer fridge at home, I would say, has got probably 2 beers in it right now. Well, 2 specific things. I've got a 9-year vertical of Sierra Nevada Bigfoot. And then there's probably, I drank a lot of what was in there, which wasn't very much at New Year's. But I know that there's a can of Champion in there because I put it in a coaster or a koozie that somebody sent me as a sample. But honestly, what I have at home is usually spirits. I don't drink very much at home. By the time I get home, it's either too late to be fussing with it, or I've got other stuff to do, and so I don't ever really get into it. But I like gin. I guess I'm like Andrew Jackson that way. I'm sort of a gin drinker, so I really like Bristow gin. I like Corsair gin. Just that nice, dry, spicy but not overwhelming.
I was about to say, when you brought up Corsair earlier, I'm kind of tired of, and I may have mentioned this to DJ or on the podcast before, I'm kind of tired of barrel-aged beers. Not barrel-aged, let me rephrase that. Bourbon barrel-aged beers.
Right.
Have just kind of worn on me because they all kind of taste the same after a while. They're all really rich. They're all really sweet. Mm-hmm. That's not true. There's a lot of different types of bourbon out there and a lot of different flavors, and I'm a huge bourbon fan.
Right.
But I have loved, like the first time I had a Corsair barrel-aged beer was actually at Crafty Bastard, and I love the fact that they were willing to do something in a gin barrel,
right,
as opposed to a bourbon barrel. Not to say that bourbon barrel-aged beer is bad. I do like it still, but it's worn on me, kind of like IPAs or other types of beers that are really popular. And I just love that differentiation of the Corsair and everything.
Back in the fall, we participated in something called Jameson Drinking Buddies. And so we're one of 17 breweries in the United States that were selected by Jameson Irish Whiskey to age beer in their barrels and then launch it at a big old party in Brooklyn. And so they sent us the barrels. When they got here, I was very disappointed because they were all stamped wild turkey. And so I called them and I said, I don't understand what the hell's going on here. And of course, this shows my radical ignorance. Irish whiskey is not bound by the same rules as Tennessee whiskey or Kentucky bourbon. They can use non-virgin oak. So they're buying all those barrels from Kentucky, shipping them to Ireland and putting JMO in them, right? So, yeah, right? And so those barrels, when they,
It's okay. No, it's fine. Got a phone call coming
for
in.
you. Can you please hold? I'm on the. It's Jack Daniel calling. They're mad about that barrel-aged beer from 1999. So anyway,
That's so funny.
when Jameson gave us free reign to put whatever in those barrels we wanted to. And so when we sat down with those guys and sort of sampled we had to sample the whiskey to make sure it was okay, and then sort of paired it with the beers and thought about what it would taste like. And they said, the one thing that we'll encourage you to do is to put a beer in these barrels that is representative of your brand. Like, we want this beer to represent who Black Abbey is and how they partner with Jameson. And so we decided to use the Special, which is our Belgian double. And so we put the Special into the Jameson barrels, and we only let it ride for about 60 days. And our objective with barrel aging beer has always been balance. It hasn't ever been like, let's overwhelm you with the oak and the vanilla and, like you said, those sort of rich, bourbony, oaky characteristics. Like, we still want that beer to be really balanced. And so we rolled the Special into those barrels, and those barrels held bourbon for X number of years, and then they held Jameson for X. Like, they were old and they were cranky, and some of them leaked, and it was terrifying. It was absolutely literally, I would come in every day, and those barrels sat kind of over there near the door, and I would walk in, and I would put my hands on them, and I would say, "Dear Lord, please don't let this beer go bad." That went on for 60 days. Like, I'm like Noah, right? Like, I'm praying over these barrels.
Oh, gosh.
And so then Gary, Gary is over the Caskmates program, and is from County Cork, I believe. But he called one day, or we were talking, and I said, if you named it yet? And I said, no. We need to name it. And I said, can you give me some good Gaelic words? And he said, well, I can't speak Gaelic. Like, you're Irish, you have one job, and that is to give me Gaelic words. And so, nothing. So we're trying to name the beer, and so I start doing a lot of reading about St. Patrick. And, St. Patrick, when he was dispatched onto the legend has it, is he's dispatched onto the island of Ireland to drive out the snakes or whatever it was he was doing. Prayed a prayer for protection for the Irish people and for himself, which is called the Lorica of St. Patrick. And so based on this prayer for protection, we thought we would name that beer Lorica. And so we made cool tap handles, and we decided it was going to be named Lorica. And so we bring it up front, and we tap it in the tap room, and I screw the tap handle on, and Andrew, who's our tap room manager, who's 25 years old, looks at the tap handle. He says, "Oh, Lorica, that's Gaelic for prayer." So I called Gary in Ireland, and I was like, my 25-year-old taproom manager from Missouri knew a Gaelic word, and you did not. You should be ashamed of yourself as an Irishman. And he's never going to live that down. But so anyway, the great thing about Lorica and that sort of Jameson barrel aging project is that I think it really showcases the ability that barrel aged beers have to still be balanced and unique in a world where the barrel-aged beer, at least for the general public, is dominated by Kentucky bourbon barrel-aged, that Alltech beer, which I think is fine. Like, I've got no beef with Alltech. I think they make a high-quality product. but it definitely carries that barrel-y, vanilla, sweetie character that a lot of people like, but is also a little bit overwhelming.
Fun, quick story. I actually, when I first went to Lexington, Kentucky, my first visit up there, I was in a corporate program through a company called Windstream Communications, and we went to the tap room at Alltech at their corporate headquarters and met the owner who actually talked about it, and he's Irish. And the tap room at Alltech is all wallpapered in old newspapers from Ireland.
Nice.
He and his wife have actually done that up as, kind of their memories of Ireland and their history. And they actually said they chose Lexington as a result of the fact that it reminded them of Ireland. It's just a beautiful area, beautiful country out there. And the bourbon barrel, I get you there. But you mentioned Alltech, so that brought that memory up. But that's cool.
I mean, they're making great beer. It certainly sells like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But I can see where many different takes on a similar style can have can lead to palate fatigue in a certain direction. That's what I was like about 8 More Beers of Winter, is that the differentiation that Corsair can lend from we're going to make last year we used a couple barrels that were 100% black walnut smoked malt whiskeys. So the beer that ended up coming out of those barrels had such a unique smoke quality because it was all smoked over some single malt, single wood smoked whiskey. I mean, it's what they ended up. It was 5 different wood smoked whiskeys: pecan and black walnut and maple and whatever, 2 others. And then they blended it into a blended smoked whiskey called Medusa, which, if you get a chance to check out, is quite good.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're fun. Corsair's a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah. All that to say, Corsair's fun. And
yes, I'm sorry. That's
no, I love it. That's awesome. I love that story. There's so much color and background there. That's so cool. Well, Carl, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Dude, no, this is what we want.
Exactly.
This is what people will listen to us for.
We have a podcast where the main thing is talking.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good.
People listen to us because they want to hear talking, not because they want to hear singing or song and dance from DJ.
Over who's got the next question.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, with that said, thank you so much again for being on. Where can people find Black Abbey in stores, and then where can people find you online? How can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about the beers that you guys brew?
Our website is called blackabbeybrewing.com, all one word, blackabbeybrewing.com. Twitter handle is Black Abbey Brew, same for Instagram. We're on the Facebook at, I don't know, if you go onto Facebook and type in Black Abbey Brewing, it'll bring you to us.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the social media channels. As far as where you can find us, your finer craft beer retailers, given that y'all are Knoxville based, in the Knoxville area, the Casual Pints all do a great job of supporting us both in cans and as well as draft. Trader Joe's runs a fair bit of our beer out there in cans. I would say the usual suspect places where you go to get good beer. Beer Market carries it quite regularly. Pretentious does a great job for our brand. Lots of good places to go and drink beer in Knoxville.
Great. Well, thank you, Carl. And with that said, this has been Chris Hill.
DJ Loop.
And remember to stay humble
and try new beer.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
'Cause I'm halfway down in the bottom of a bottle and I ain't gonna change my